First of all, I just wanted to say thank you very much for having me today. As a sole trader, do I need to speak a bit louder? Is that better? Perfect. As a sole trader, I find that you spend so much time alone in your own little cubbyhole doing your own work that it's just such a delight to be amongst other creatives and be in a room with other people. It just only magic happens when you get together with other creative people. So thank you very much for having me. So I'm going to be talking a little bit today on the topic of wilderness. And I feel that it's quite an apt topic because as a creative, it really is like your Bear Grylls in the jungle. It's like you've been dropped from a helicopter into the middle of the jungle. You've got no map, no compass, you have no idea what to do or where to go. And the only tools you have are basically your own two hands and whatever you can find in front of you. And you just got to run and work it out for yourself. There's no right or wrong. But on the other side of that, there is no right or wrong. So you can basically make a million mistakes, and it's all part of that journey. So my journey through the jungle of creative business started when I was a teenager. And maybe like a lot of you, I spent a lot of time just in my room drawing pictures, just doodling in a sketchbook. And then one day my dad came home with something that blew my mind, and that was t-shirt transfer paper. And that was like the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. So it meant that I took all my sketchbooks and I took those drawings and then I put them on t-shirts, and then all of a sudden I've made fashion. And I would walk around with these terribly made t-shirts. And one time I was walking into a store and the shopkeeper said to me, where did you get that t-shirt? And I said, well, I made it. And they placed an order. They said, can you make me some for my shop? And that was this moment, this inkling, this person took a chance on me. And it hadn't even occurred to me that this was an opportunity to turn my hobby into a business. So pretty quickly I realized you can't sell t-shirt transfer paper t-shirts to shops, because you wash them once or twice, it's over. So I had to decide on that moment, I'm going to give this a go. So I researched, I got out the yellow pages, and I looked up screen printers, and I found someone. And then I was like, at the time you couldn't buy blank t-shirts, so I had to make some. So I looked up a local production house that would sew the t-shirts for me. And I turned up, and her name was Jan, and she ran this factory off Chapel Street. I'm not sure if anyone remembers her. She was an absolute angel. And on that factory floor, I turned up with zero understanding of how clothes are made. And she educated me, and she was like, this is a pattern. This is how you construct clothes. This is how we do the magic. And so right then and there, she took the time and energy to explain to me how clothes are made. And then I would go to the fabric wholesalers into their big warehouses and just turn up and be like, do you have any odd rolls of fabric? And that was something they used to do, that they would have these job lots that are rolls of fabric that other designers had made too much, or the color was a misdye. And so they had them off in a dusty corner and you could pick through them, and they would sell them to young designers super cheap. So I grabbed job lot rolls, I went back to the factory, they turned them into t-shirts or sweaters, and I would have them screen printed. And then at that time I was studying creative arts at BCA, and so I would use the Melbourne University market to sell them at lunchtime, and that would pay for my books. So I had in my mind that I was going to be like a cartoonist or a filmmaker. I was studying filmmaking as my major, and I graduated, and obviously no filmmakers. Steven Spielberg was not knocking on my door. But I was selling sweaters at lunchtime, so I was like, maybe I'm going to give this a go. It seems like the flow of energy is taking me in this direction. So I'm just going to jump on this train and see where it goes. So I became part of a group of young designers that was working out of Melbourne Central called the Fashion Incubator. And we had like a workroom, and we would do fashion parades. And we were doing a Melbourne Fashion Week parade. And the model they had assigned me, he did not fit my clothes. It wasn't going to work. It was going to be terrible. So crisis mode, I needed a solution. And on the spot, I just sewed up a llama sweater, and I think there's a slide of it going around. You can see it's beautifully made, but that photo was taken last week. So that sweater is 16 years old, and it's still kicking around, it's still being worn. Thank you to my friend Mark, who's been keeping it all these years in peak condition. So I quickly hand sewed that, and there was a sweater. And of course, the story is that everyone was like, wow, look at that llama sweater. So I'm back in the wilderness again. I'm like, how do I even produce this? How does this become a product that I can't sit there and hand sew multiples of this? So I was back in the jungle, and I had to work that out. So the process as well, you can see, I'll just talk about it very quickly, is I take my drawings of the animals, and I convert that into just its bare pieces, cut that in fabric, and then I've got my embroidery team here in Melbourne that do the amazing embroidery, which sets it like it's not going anywhere. That is not llama anymore. That is a professionally made animal sweater. So yeah, that's the process. I could, obviously, afterwards we can talk more about that if you want to get more technical, but so that's how the sweaters are made. So having to do this talk, I kind of had to really stop and have a think about what my core pillars of my business are. And I came up with 3 kind of words that really, I think, dictate how I run my life and my businesses, I think, to reflect my own values. And those 3 words that came to mind were community, care, and cuteness. And I'm going to probably talk a little bit more about those. But first, I'm going to ask you guys the most important question that I ever ask anyone, ever, which is, what's your favorite animal? So you can tell each other if you want. I'm sure you've got one, at least one. You might have 2. You might have a bit of a problem choosing, but maybe tell the person next to you because they want to know. Everyone wants to know because it's so interesting. Like, what is your favorite animal? And if you want to know what, I'll get to it. All right, so as you can see, everyone's got quite a lot to say about their favorite animals, which it's like, that's exactly what happens. I asked this. So back when I made that llama, I was like, okay, now I actually have to make a collection of animal sweaters. And it's like, where do you even start? Because all animals are incredible and amazing. And so the first pillar of what I was talking about was community. So as a designer, it's like the last thing you want to do is ask somebody else, hey, what do you think I should make? Because you're like, anything they say, you're going to be like, no, I'm not making that. But I sort of threw myself out there. I'm like, at the time, I had a retail space in Melbourne Central, and I had a little Facebook group because that was the extent of social media. And I just put it out on Facebook, and I said, hey, guys, what animal should I make on the next animal sweater? And it was like a torrent of animals coming at me. And I'm like, whoa, people deeply care. They deeply care about animals, and maybe for different reasons. It might be the way they look. They might just be super cute. It might be their behaviors that resonate with you. It could be maybe where they live. Maybe you went on a trip and you saw it and it just reminds you of that. It could be their qualities that you see in yourself that is reflected in that animal. So I started to get a gauge on that the animals are really deeply connected to people. And I was like, this is a good opportunity to build a community around this product. Because the more people interact with you, it becomes like it's a reciprocal relationship. They're telling me they're animals, and then I'm taking that information and I'm creating the product, and they feel that they have an ownership over that product. I contributed, my feelings and my emotions were taken into account, and she's made a product to reflect what I told her. And then that energy they're giving me back of that ownership is like, they believe in me, they're giving me a reason to keep working, and they're also buying the product, which is financially supporting the project. So it really struck a chord with me. In what ways can you keep building community in whatever projects you're doing? Because I'm one person, I can make a great sweater, no one's going to know about it, no one's going to care about it. But all of a sudden, if you can build this sort of community around yourself, it becomes much bigger than just you. So that was what I sort of took now to pretty much all my other projects. Like whenever I do an art exhibition, I try to get as many contributors as possible, because the more positive energy you get around something, the more people care. So community, and then the next one obviously was care, because if you've got something you deeply care about, you can have a conversation with someone and tell them 3 things about why you care about it. And then they walk away and they care a little bit more about it too. Maybe they didn't think about that thing before, but all of a sudden, because you had that conversation, they start to care. And I would like to think in a way that talking about animals, you know, I would people would tell me they're animals and I would start to research them deeply, because I didn't feel you can't just represent them like just their appearance. You need to embody a bit more about who they are to really design them properly. So I would go a deep Google, try to read as deeply as I can on each of those animals. And at first I thought, I'm only going to really work with endangered animals to bring awareness. But as you research animals, you realize pretty much there's no such thing as a wild animal anymore that doesn't have some element of endangerment, that isn't affected by human activity. So that made me reassess my whole business model of what am I doing here? So as a creative, I think you get to that moment in your life when you have a total existential crisis, when you're like, it's super fun to make stuff, but is it all just going into landfill? Am I just contributing more to the problem? Like, I make this wonderful thing, I can sell 1 million of them, and half of them will be in the trash by, you know, this time next year. So I kind of had that moment when I was like, people keep coming up to me and being like, wow, this is a great product. You should be expanding. You should be selling in multiple stores around the world. You should take it global. And I just don't want to do that. I just have no aspiration whatsoever to grow my project any bigger than what I can hold in my own 2 hands. I do hand make all the parts of it except for the actual embroidery. So I don't even want to grow it further than that because the scale of it just terrifies me. But it sort of made me reassess business and success, because people seem to think the only way you can be successful is by making millions of dollars and having heaps of product out in the world, which is absolutely not who I am or what I believe in. So I changed my whole process of how I make my sweaters. So I had retail stores. I had my store in Flinders Lane, which I had to fill every day with stuff and sell things to pay for the rent and my staff. And so I moved my business online. I got rid of every product except for the sweaters. And the sweaters are like the joy of my life. Like, that's what I enjoy making. So I make the sweaters. I make one. I do this competition and I ask the people, what's your favorite animal? I get a few thousand responses. I put them all in a spreadsheet. I pick out a few based on whatever I'm deciding on the day is my reasoning. And I research them and I make my samples. And then I have one sample of each of those sweaters, and then I have a launch day. And that also, as a creative, me running through the jungle, I need some discipline for myself. My own roadmap that I've given myself is I have a set launch day, and that's the day the samples will be done. That's the day they'll be sold. And it's a pre-sale model, which I'm not sure if anyone else is doing that in this room, but I'll talk about it a little bit because it's just transformed my life. That I have these samples and I say, you've got a set amount of time to order them, and I'm going to make what you order. And that's what I'm making this year for the sweaters. And it's a limited batch. And it's so creatively freeing because I can make whatever animals I want. I can go crazy with my design. I can be like, absolutely nobody is going to order this, but I can still make it because it fills my soul. And if it's a dud, it's a dud. I'm not stuck with mountains of dead stock. I don't have to make them. I can make, if one of them is a hit and they order through the roof, I'll make those up until a point. I always cut it off at a certain amount, but it means that I'm making only what sells. I'm not going to be stuck with a mountain of dead stock. I haven't invested in it. I haven't spent any money on making it yet except for the sampling costs. And it's just in my own way, I'm reducing my personal waste on the planet. Because I think everybody knows all the grim stats about textile waste in Australia. We're like this, I think, the second worst in the world. And each one of us, our shopping habits and our throwing away habits is contributing. Like, I think textile waste is mostly composed of clothing, and us shopping and throwing it away. So I decided I'm just going to make the highest quality product I can make. I hope people will care deeply about the product, so they're not actually going to throw it away. They're going to hold on to it because they have a sentimental attachment to it, and it's going to last them. They're going to wear it until it's like, well, 16 years is as far as I know so far, but hopefully they can keep going a bit longer than that. And then my last point on my 3 pillars was cuteness. And every project I do, I try to have that cuteness, because I think it's actually quite subversive. Because you can hide a lot of meaning under cute things. People are walking around wearing these animals, and they are like a compliment machine. So you walk into a cafe and someone will be like, hey, nice squall. And you just feel like, yeah, you know, they just got reintroduced back into the mainland. Did you know that? That's cool. And it starts a kernel of, you know, the more you're talking about animals, the more people are seeing animals, maybe animals they've never even heard of, it gets your mind clicking a little bit more, just in general, about your place in the world and animals. So I do like to think that there is a deeper meaning in the animal sweaters to bring that world to people through cuteness. Sorry, I've lost my place, but it doesn't matter. I think I'll just say that going back to my metaphor about Bear Grylls, running in the jungle, peeing in a snakeskin, that we all sort of have our own journey in our creative businesses. And like I said, there's no right or wrong way to do it, but you have a freedom in a way to make your business whatever animal you want. So if you can take anything away from this, I guess it would be having a look within your own sort of business practices in your own community. In what way can you make it that animal that you want it to be? And I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.